So one of my friends who's interested in the fantastic 512 Vector Sequencer was asking me how easy it is to use it as a sequencer for external MIDI gear. Given that the Vector Sequencer itself has two MIDI jacks on it here, the MIDI 1 and MIDI 2 outs, it's actually very easy. You've just got to get the adapters out of the box that come with it and plug it in and do some stuff. I'm actually using the jack expander, which you can see up there with the red cable stuck in it. And I'm using that as my MIDI output. I could have used these. I'm not, simply because I'm not. Now anyway, so what I've got out of shot is a Behringer Model D, which is connected to the Vector jack expander. I've got a quadra through in between, but that's kind of irrelevant. That's just a MIDI through box that splits it into 4 outs. Now the Behringer Model D is running on channel 14 for MIDI, and I'm just going to show you how that's set up. Noting I've got RC24, which is external sync. I'm syncing from Cubase, not going into that right now. So to cut a long story mid-length, what we do is go to Global, and we go to the routing page, and then we use the encoder 9, which is this one over here, to scroll through until we get to your MIDI out. Now if you were using MIDI 1 or 2, you'd be using MIDI out 1 or MIDI out 2 in this page. I'm not. I'm using the jack expander, so I scroll past the USB options and you can see jack expander MIDI. And if you can see this, I'm not sure you can, but the whited part says CH14, so channel 14, and it's routing from part 2 in the sequencer. So any notes that come from part 2 in the sequencer when they're not muted will route to MIDI channel 14 via the jack expander. Couldn't be simpler, could it? Your musical part is part 2, it uses MIDI channel 14 and it will exit the sequencing device via the jack expander MIDI out, and then it goes to the Behringer. So if I now go to the parts page, you can see my part 2 is not muted. If it was muted, it would be grayed out, so it's not. And what we're going to do now is I'm going to hit play over on Cubase and you'll see the clock start. So you can see the red light is the LED going along, and you can see part 4 is lighting up, which is doing something, but I've actually got it turned down. I'm actually going to mute it to save confusion. Sorry for bumping the camera. Now, we don't hear any sound from part 2 because there's nothing there. So I go to part 2, you can see it's handily saying part 2 here. If I was at a different part, right, I'm in part 3 now. Part 4, I can see some notes because I programmed them earlier, but they're muted. Back to part 2, there's nothing. So the gates are all silent. So if I want to just turn on all the gates, all I've got to do is hit encoder 9 again. Okay, now that's running at 8-step sequence cycle. I could run it as up to 64, any note between 1 and 64. It's pretty fantastic. We're not going into that right now. But as you can see, because I'm routing MIDI channel 14 from composition in the sequence part 2, I get that. That's all just one note. So let's go into the record mode, and we're going to use the step sequencer as a virtual keyboard. And I'm just going to play something in that's a little... Oops. I'm in step sequencer. Okay. I've got a bit of a melody going there. I actually wanted that to be a C. So you can see what I did there is I can scroll around using this. So I've hit stop. Now I'm going to hit start again. Okay, so now I've got some notes. And you can see the gate length changing. Alright, I don't want to use them all though, so... I've got a little bit of reverb coming through the disc. I'm just going to turn that up a bit. Alright, so now I have the Vector 512 running as a sequencer via the jack expander to my Behringer Model D. Timing's perfect in line with my Cubase as the master, using silent waves and my Moto interface. Not what this is about. But let's have a little bit of fun with this sequence now. I've purposely let it pretty bland, okay? So I'm just going to bring in a kick, a basic beat. I'm going to bring in a basic beat, take out the rim shot. Oh, yeah, okay. This should be a pretty straightforward beat. And I'm just going to play this sequence over and again over the top of it. Now if I go to control, octave, see octave changing there. Ouch. Alright, what if I want to just transpose it? Okay, and I can also make it start on step 2 and be 5 steps long. So starts on step 4, start on step 4, and it's a 5-note sequence. Let's make that 6 notes. So just let that sink in. By changing the start and length of the sequence, you can easily create a melody and then just screw around with it and make it do all sorts of different things. So I'm going to continue doing exactly that, and I'm going to play with the direction and a few other things too. I'm going to change it to backwards. So now it's reading the gate and the pitch commands in reverse. Alt 1 bounces from 1 to 8 and back again, or 1 to whatever your maximum number of steps is. Alt 2 plays a double note at your minimum and maximum step quantities. That's quite a groove, isn't it? Let's see, playing 4 steps now. I'm going to switch that to 2. That's quite instructive. You can see the start is step 2 and it's playing 4 notes in a step sequence. So let's change that to 5. So if you just kind of think about that and you jam this out by just twisting the dials and having a listen, you can come up with all sorts of sweet patterns which you could cut, copy, paste, do whatever you want with. Or just don't, I don't care. It's your music. Well, that was a nice little transition, wasn't it? Yeah, so that's as easy as it is to program external gear. You've also got this modulation option here, which is for, say, internal modulation. And you can see it stepping through in quarter notes. I can change that. So now it's going through in eighth notes. I want to leave it as quarter notes because it's kind of cool. And I'm going to make the parameter octave. Right? So, if you're paying attention, I've got quarter notes and I'm going to program some octave changes. I'm going to hit modulation again, and I'm going to make that one go up 1, that one go down 1. Right? I sped it up to eighths. I actually liked it as quarters. But now, see, I've got my direction capacity again, and I can go backwards. So that's just taking that modulation of octave, transposition of octave in a backwards pattern. Not that interesting, but... And again, you can do all those groovy things with the length being... So now I've got the length as 4 again, just for that octave pattern. It hasn't changed the note pattern. So let's go back out of here and go back to control. Let's change this rate. So we went a bit more into things than I thought we were going to then. I basically, to go back over it, showed you how easy it is to sequence an external MIDI piece of hardware using the Vector or the jack expander. The only difference if you're not using the jack expander is you've got to use the MIDI mini to normal converter, which comes with the Vector. Really easy to set up, and that was basically through global scrolling, global scrolling through to the part you want, which for me was jack expander, make the channel 14 and the part 2, because that's where I put the music. Well, I don't know if it was music, it was sounds. Anyway, and it was as easy as that pretty much. And then I just went to gate, turned some gates on, put some pitch commands in, and yeah, so you can see where the gates I've got blanked out that I didn't listen to or didn't want to play. I made them rests. They're grey on this lovely OLED screens. So the notes that are present are the lighter green. So if I get rid of, say, you, not you watching, I mean you, anyway, you know. So now that one's grey, right? So if I wanted to get the gate back again, Now you can also command velocity as well if you have an output for pitch gate velocity using CV. You can do that too. I hope this has been somewhat instructive as to how easy this device is to run. It's a beautiful thing. And as I said, I've got it synced up with a whole bunch of MIDI gear, a whole bunch of CV gear in my Eurorack, and I've got, say, Cubase as my time master because I want to record straight into there and stuff around. But of course you can't or shouldn't at all do that with MIDI. You should do that using something like Silent Waves and using your PPQN output from something like the Silent Wave software through, I would recommend, a Moto interface. Anyway, this has taken a bit longer than I'd wanted, but I hope it really shows you some fundamentals of this amazing piece of hardware. Thank you.